Hi everyone, welcome back to my quilt room. Today I'm going to show you how to do a Quilt As You Go Courthouse Steps block. Now this is the block here, and this block is very similar to the log cabin. Both of them have a long history dating back to the 1900s, and I just love the old style blocks. And the log cabin starts with your center square, and you sew strips going around clockwise or counterclockwise around the block to or around the square to make the block. For the courthouse steps, you again are starting with your center square, but you're sewing strips on opposite sides. So you're going side to side, top, bottom, side, side, top, bottom to form this step right here. So I'm going to show you how to do that in a quilt as you go method. And once we get our blocks done, and I'll show you how to sash them together, I'm going to also show you how to do a quilt as you go border along with the binding. So I hope you'll stay tuned for that. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I did was to decide on how big I wanted my center and my strips. Now you could do anywhere from a 2-inch center, 2.5, up to, I wouldn't go more than 3.5. And then your strips could be anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5. So I did a 3.5 center and 2.5 strips all around. So first I prepared my batting and my backing. So my both of these I cut at 16 because I wanted to give myself a little extra room for if it shifted or shrank up a little. And what I did was I laid my backing down, put my batting on top, lined them up, and then I did a little spray basting so they wouldn't move. And just a little, you don't really need a lot. And then just smooth that down. Okay, so once I got that down, then I wanted to find the center of my block. So I just folded it in half and just pressed the center, and then folded it in half again, pressed it again, and that should give me a center point, which looks to be right about there. So then I took my square and I did the same thing, except I just finger press this just to find my center point. Then go the other way. And then I laid that right down on top of that. Okay, so now to be really sure that I have that centered, I measured from side to side just to make sure, because if even though this is in the center, I still may be off a little on each side depending on where I put that. So just to be on the safe side, I just checked it. Oh, let's go this way. And I have about 6 1/4 there, and 6 1/4 there. This is a little over 6 1/4, and that's at 6. So I want to bring this down up just a tad, ever so slightly. And now I have 6 1/4 there, and oops, a little bit more. Okay, that should do it. So now I know this is perfectly centered. And you can stick a pin in here if you want, or you can even just do a little spray basting for that too. But I'm just going to put a pin in there for now. And then what I want to do is I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to show you how we're going to sew these strips on. So let's go over there. Okay, so now we have our batting backing and our first square on here. and we're going to sew our strips on either side and then top and bottom. So we're going to start with the sides, and I'm going to use the light fabric for that. So basically what I want to do is just line up the top of my strip with the top of my square, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch straight down. Now you can pre-cut these, or you can just use the whole strip and then cut it at the end. And that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to line this up, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch straight down. And you want to try to stop as close as you can to the very end. Okay, so, and I'm also using purple thread because I wanted purple for the back, and then I figured no one's really going to see this, the purple for the top, because it's just going to be underneath. So I just used the same for both. And now what I want to do is I want to cut this strap down. So I'm going to fold this up, similar to the same construction as our log cabin. And then I'm going to cut this off. Okay. Now you can take this to the iron, or you can just finger press it, which is basically what I'm going to do. I'm going to use my seam roller here and just fold this back, and then just press it down with that. And that makes it really pretty crisp there. And then we're going to do same with the next one. So I'm going to turn this and line that up with the top on the side, and I'm going to sew this down 1/4 inch. Okay, I'm going to fold that up again, line it up with my side here, give it a crease, and then cut that off. And I find if I move this forward, it allows me to cut it a little better than when I'm back here. I get right into that corner there. Okay, so that is our sides. I'm going to seam roll that. Okay, and cut off your threads as you go too. So now we want to do so that was our two sides. Now we want to do our top and bottom, which I'm going to do in the darker pink, or purple, sorry, the darker purple. So I already have some strips from my previous blocks. I'm going to see if I have anything that fits that. And I don't, so we'll just take a long strip. Or longer. Here's a longer one. Okay, so now we're going to sew that 1/4 inch. Making sure it's lined up all the way down. Now, if you go like a thread or two over, it's not a big deal. Just sort of clip that off. And then we're going to, again, fold that up, crease it, so we know where to cut. And cut that off. Okay, then we're going to take our next one. Go to the other side. And 1/4 inch all the way down. Okay, fold that up. Cut it off. Okay, now we have our first round of strips. And at any point, you can certainly take this to the iron and iron that down. I have a thread. That's an extra thread. Okay. Cut my thread off. Okay. Oops. Okay. So now we're going to go to the sides now again. Okay, so now we're going to go back and we're going to iron this down. Okay, so here's our block, and now we're going to iron this down. Get those seams nice and crisp. Plus we have some wrinkles in here too. All right, now we're going to square our block up, and you can see how this went a little wonky on me. So that's why I always allow for a little extra room. So I'm going to square this down to a 15-inch block. And I just happen to have a 15-inch ruler. So basically I'm just going to lay this on here. And I know that my center should be 3 inches finished. So on a 15-inch ruler, the center should be from the 6 to the 9. That should be your center square. And so I'm going to line that up with my center square. And then I'm going to trim this down to 15 inches. So now I have my perfectly squared 15-inch block. Here's the back. And I just have to cut all my little threads off, which I will do. And then I'm going to finish all my blocks, and I'm going to come back and show you how to sash them together, how to sash our rows together, then how to put our quilt as you go borders and our binding and finish up the quilt. So I'll be right back. So I have all my blocks sewn down, and what I did was I just put them over here on my design wall, and how I oriented them was, and you can do this like one of two ways. You can either make them all the same direction, like this, have them all go, the same way, or what I did was I just alternated the dark and the light sides and made them like this. So that's the way I did mine. So let's take a couple of these blocks and we will sash them together, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay. So to sash our two blocks together, what we're going to do is I cut 1-inch strips for the back, and then a 2-inch strip for the front. And what you're going to do is you're going to take the 2-inch strip, fold it in half, iron that down, and that'll be for the front side. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our one block, we're going to put our 1-inch strip on the back, oops, right sides together, line that up edge to edge. I'm going to take some clips and clip that down. And I cut a little over just so I had enough, which I like to always do because I'd rather be over than under. Then we're going to take our 2-inch strip that we folded in half and ironed, and we're going to put that on the front, and we're going to line that up on raw edges together. And we're going to clip that with our back one too. Okay, make sure our back didn't move. Okay, that looks good. We're going to take that to the machine and we're going to sew 1/4 inch all the way down. Okay, so we have them both sewn down, and I'm going to take this to the iron and iron that back one flat so I can connect it to our second one. Just makes it a little easier to maneuver. And you know what, I'm going to cut these edges off so I can see where my edge is when I line it up. Okay, so now I'm going to take this back piece, line it up with the back of our second block, raw edges together, making sure our blocks are even all the way down. And then I'm going to clip that. And then I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch all the way down. We're going to connect these two blocks. Okay, so We have them both sewn together, and they should lay nice and flat. Now we're going to take our top strip and we're going to fold this over to connect the front. And I'm going to iron this down so it lays flat. Now you can do a couple of different things. You can just pin it. You can glue baste it. Or you can just hold it down, whatever you feel like is more comfortable for you. I'm just going to put a couple pins in here. The ironing really helps it lay flat too. So when you take it to the machine, it should stay down. I'm going to put one at the bottom. Like that. Okay, so let's take that to the machine and sew that down. So now we have our 2 blocks sewn down together, and we sewed about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And that's the front, and then there's the back. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing, adding our other 2 blocks on this row. And then when we get to the second row, when we join the rows together, we're going to do the same thing, same exact thing. So we're going to do the 1 inch on the back, and then the 2 inch folded in half on the front. And you're just going to cut that the length of whatever your 4 blocks is, or however many blocks you're doing. So I'll be back when I get all that done, and then I'll show you how to put the borders on. So my blocks are all sewn down. I have all my sashing on, and my rows are sewn together. And now we're going to put our borders on. Now, traditionally, if you were just doing a quilt top, then you would take measurements of your top, your middle, and your bottom, and then take the average and then cut your borders. But we've already quilted everything. So our borders, really, we're just going to measure what our edges are and cut our borders accordingly. So let me show you how we're going to do that. I'm just going to take this end. And to be honest, you don't even have to cut them exactly, which is what I'm going to do. I'm not even going to cut it exactly the same length because I'm just going to trim it up at the end. So I have my border for the one side. I'm going to do side, side, top, and bottom. So let me show you how we're going to do this. Let me bring you overhead so you can see better. Okay, so I have my border strip now. I cut my border strips at 3 inches because when I put in the, when we sew it and then I put in the batting, I'm going to wind up with a 2.5 inch border. So let me show you how we're going to do this. We're going to line up our border edge to edge, right sides together on the top, and then we're going to do the same thing for the bottom. So let me just put a few pins in here, or a few clips, sorry, I want to do clips. Put a few clips in here to hold this, and then I'm going to flip it over and put the bottom on. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to put the other side, right sides together. And again, I over cut this so I can just trim it up at the end. Okay, so now we're going to sew this straight down 1/4 inch. Okay, so now I have my front and my back sewn down 1/4 inch on this one side, and now I'm going to trim my edges off. So I'm going to line this up. And I'm going to trim that off. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Okay. So now I'm going to do that same thing to this side. And then when I come back, I'll show you how we're going to put the top and the bottom on. Okay, so that was our second side. And we have that all sewn down, and then I'm going to trim that up. All right, so now before we do the top and the top and the bottom, we're going to put our batting in. So let me show you how we're going to do that. We want to get our batting, and I cut 2.5 inch strips of, just make sure, yep, 2.5 inch strips of batting. And what we're going to do is we're going to place that right up against our edge here. Now we have our top and bottom border folded back, and we want to attach our binding to our edge here. So what I did was I lined this up next to this, and I did a zigzag all the way down just to hold this to the quilt. Now you can do this a couple different ways. I did the zigzag, but you can fold this over your top and your bottom, and you can do some, decorative stitching on here if you want to hold it in. You could do some straight lines, you can do some zigzags, whatever you want to do. I chose to just not do any top stitching because I don't really have any in my uh, blocks. So I'm just going to zigzag this to the edge. So that holds it on there. And this way, when it gets washed or anything, it doesn't bunch up inside. So I'm going to take that to the machine. I'm just going to do a simple zigzag all the way down. Okay, I'll be right back when I do that. Okay, so now we have that all zigzagged down, and it's just holding that right to the quilt, right on that edge, and this is what it looks like. So now we're going to just fold this over, the front and the back, and encase that in there. You can iron that if you want, but we'll probably do that before we put the binding on anyway. And then I'm going to do that to the other side, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how we're going to do the top and the bottom now with our sides on. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I have my second side done. I'm going to pull this over. And you can see you don't see any stitching on the front or the back. It's all done inside. And it's holding that batting nicely. Okay. Now I'm going to just trim this extra batting I have at the tops and bottoms. I think I did it to the side already. Yep. Okay. So now we're going to do the top and the bottom. Get all these out of my way. So first we're going to start with our front and back for our sashing, for our border, I'm sorry, front and back with the border. We're going to line our border up. Now we're going to line it up with the border that we already put on. So we're going to line that up, and you can go over a little bit so we have, make sure we have enough here. And we're going to clip that down just like we did on the sides. We're going to do that with the front and the back. I'm going to sew that down 1/4 inch on the top. I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so we have our borders all on, all sewn down with our batting in between. And I also cleaned up the corners, made them nice and squared, cut off all the extra fabric. And now we're going to do our binding. Now, I did a 2 1/4, folded it in half and ironed it. And I usually do my binding on the back, wrap it around the front and top stitch it, but I'm going to show you a little different method today. We're going to do it on the front, and then when I wrap around to the back, I'm going to top stitch, I'm going to stitch in the ditch. So that's another different way of doing it. So what we want to do is, I'm going to start from the top, somewhere in the middle-ish, and I'm going to leave about a 12-inch tail because we want to join that at the end. And I'm going to start clipping this down. You're going to do raw edge to raw edge. And I'm going to clip all this down. I'm just going to get it started really, and then I'm just going to take the whole thing to the machine because I don't want to clip all of it because we have to do our corners a certain way and you don't want them all clipped down. So just a few clips to get me started. And then I'm going to take this to the machine, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch all of the way around. So I'll be right back. Okay, so now our binding is sewn down on the front all the way around, and we're going to join this over here. Okay, so we have this much left, and we're going to join these two pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this out flat, and what you want to do is you want to take this one, fold it to here, pull this back a little, and then take this one. And what you want to do is you want to cut your binding so that you have the width of the binding, the amount of the width of the binding overlapping that much. So in our case, we had a 2 1/4 inch binding. So we want to overlap 2 1/4 inch because we're going to join them together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this down to meet that and cut that edge off. So we're going to cut this top one off. Okay, and then overlap that here. Okay, so now I want to find a space where I can overlap my 2 1/4 inches and give myself enough room so I could join them. So we'll say right around here. I'm going to pull this back just a little so I could see the underneath. And I'm going to take my binding, open it up, and I know this is about this is how much I want to overlap them. So I'm going to take a marking tool and I want to mark my top piece and my bottom piece. So now I have my 2 1/4, and I'm going to cut on both of those edges. I'm going to cut this one here. Fold this back, and I'm going to cut this one here. And now I know I have 2 1/4 inches to join them together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this side, fold it down. And if you didn't leave yourself enough room, which I think I might be a little tight here, but we're going to try to make this work. And then you're going to take this one and you're going to open it up and lay it on top of this one. And then you're going to sew diagonal, like you do when you join your bindings or your sashings, or to connect them. So I'm going to take that to machine and do that. And I'll be right back. Okay, so my binding is all sewn down. Okay, I joined it right here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the binding and I'm going to turn it to the back. So let me show you how I'm going to do that. And what you can do is, to make it a little easier, you can also take your iron and iron it out. And that will help it lay flat so that you can turn it to the back. So I think I'm actually going to do that. Okay, so, whoops. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to turn this over. And I'm going to take my binding and I'm going to bring that to the back. And I'm going to make sure that I'm covering that stitch line, because when I stitch in the ditch on the front, we want to catch that on the back. So what you could do is a couple of things. You can clip it if you're comfortable with that. Just make sure it's clipped all the way around and it's reaching that stitch line in the back. You just want it to hit that stitch line. Or what you could do is you can do a little glue basting. But since this is such a large expanse, I'll be here all day gluing it, so I'm just going to put a lot of clips in there. So I'm going to clip all this down, and then I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to stitch in the ditch all the way around. And I'll show you what that looks like when I get back. So here's our finished quilt. I think it turned out really nice. And we did the Quilt As You Go Courthouse block. And I showed you also how to put a border on, a Quilt As You Go border. And then the binding we did on the front instead of our normal on the back. And I flipped it to the back and did the stitch in the ditch. So I think it came out really, really nice. And here's the back. And I did the same fabric that I did for the center square. And I think that turned out really nice. So I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you found it helpful. And if you liked it, I hope you subscribe and give it a thumbs up. And make sure you hit that notification bell so you can find out when I put my next video out. So in the meantime, happy sewing and sew something happy.